In 2013, Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines, wiped across the islands. At the time, it was the strongest typhoon ever measured, and it devastated the Philippines. We arrived there within a week. There was a 30-foot storm surge, and the complication of this storm surge was up to 2012, the news in the Philippines would refer to a huge wave coming in with a hurricane as being a tidal wave, which technically is not true. They happen differently, they cause the same effect. So starting in 2013, they called it a storm surge, and nobody really knew what that meant. So a 30-foot storm surge hit this neighborhood. I got to walk way far back in and see the buildings that were still left were 4 and 5 bedroom homes with big garages. And this wave went back several miles and wiped out everything. Imagine a wave 6 times taller than I am wiping through a flat island like that. The typhoon caused over 6,000 deaths, people that were identified, and 1,700 people that were never found. They were most likely washed out with the storm surge. We arrived, Heart to Heart arrived the first week and started doing medical care. I arrived on day 33 with a replacement team. At that point, we could arrive at the airport. That was the airport at Cebu. And at this point, it's actually receiving planes. There are no walls. Most of the roof was gone, but they were servicing the runway. It was working. So on day 40, so my team started seeing people, and we would go from barangay to barangay, which are neighborhoods in the Philippines. We would set up tents, or if there was a building still standing, we would work in the building. It was amazing to us. We would send our drivers ahead of time, and they would let people know that we're coming, and by the time we got there, they could assemble enough tables that even if we were out on a road, we would have chairs to sit in and tables to work on. This in particular was a home in Barangay Balanak, and we were there on day 40 after the typhoon. We saw an elderly woman, although when I think back, she's about my age now. She had super high blood pressure. She was at stroke level. Our doctors were extremely concerned about her. So we gave her medication and asked her to sit down and rest for a while. We were going to check on her for the next couple hours. And she was obviously agitated and said, I can't stay, I can't stay. She spoke mostly Tagalog, so we had people interpreting. And after she left, the pastor told us that her grandsons had been washed out to sea. And today was day 40. And in their traditional system, or traditional beliefs, that's the last day the soul is on earth. And so she wanted to walk the beach and be as close as she could to them. Haiti, of course, was another situation. It was an earthquake, but there were more than 100,000 people that died in that earthquake. A lot of times, earthquake damage is caused by lack of codes. So an earthquake of this magnitude happening in the United States would not cause as much damage. And this is some of the long-term effects. There were people in Haiti living in tents for the next year. This is Moore, Oklahoma. Those of you that remember, the tornado that came through was a Category 5 and wiped about a 2-mile wide swath through Moore. We were wandering the neighborhoods, which is one thing we do. The medical team will be set up in one place, but several of us will go walk the neighborhoods and offer tetanus shots, because most adults do not get tetanus shots, boosters. And when you're going through things like this, you need your tetanus shot boosters. So we're walking through, and one of my associates was Zach, a friend of my daughter's, who's an EMT. So we're walking through, and we see this one house, and we could see a storm cellar in their front yard. So in Oklahoma, you usually don't have basements. Instead, you bury these storm shelters, and that's where you go when there's a tornado. And there was a kid there, about 10 or 12, and he had gone through the tornado in that storm shelter, and he was talking to us about what it was like. He challenged Zach to go down in that storm cellar. And when I say storm cellar, they're the size of a good-sized closet. I mean, they are not very big. And think of being down there for the 20 minutes it took for that tornado to pass over and really know that it was gone, and then to open it up, and this is what he saw. So Zach agreed, of course he did, went down in the storm cellar. The kid stands on the door, and he says, okay, I don't want you to think about my neighborhood. I want you to think about your house and your neighborhood. And now he stepped off of it, and Zach stepped out. And Zach told us later it was very disturbing. It was very hard to think that this is what those people had gone through. So when there's disasters, we all turn on the TV and we start watching, and we're so excited when we see people getting pulled from the wreckage and all those things happening. Nonprofits go in, governments go in, sometimes the military goes in to help people out. And we bring in food, we bring in medicine, we bring in some building supplies, we bring in a way to purify water. But in a few weeks, even in these long-term situations, we're gone in a few months. What happens after that? I want you to think about what it would be like if you were in a situation like they were in the Philippines. So everything in your neighborhood, when I'm talking about a neighborhood, I'm talking about, several miles wide, is gone. You've lost your friends. You've probably lost relatives. You may be like that grandma that lost her grandsons. You don't have any money because it's all wiped away. You had the clothes you were wearing that day, and you are dependent upon the government or nonprofits to provide clothing, food, and continue with your life. And that's what we do the first few weeks we're there. But what happens long term? Because when everything's gone, the businesses are gone, you don't have a job anymore. You don't have income coming in. When all the businesses are gone, the banks are gone. Now in the United States, in this situation, we have federally insured money in the banks. Developing countries do not have that. So when your bank is gone, your money's gone. You need to rebuild. But the first supplies that come in go to rebuild things like water systems and telephone towers and all of that. You are a long ways down the list before you're going to get to start rebuilding things. I spoke to somebody after being here yesterday. She said her brother had worked in Louisiana for, I think she said, 5 years after Katrina. He was with FEMA. We're fortunate. I know people complain about FEMA. I do too. But we are very fortunate to have them. So long term, what happens? Statistically, 27% of the people in the world are farmers. A lot of them subsistence farmers. It is a much higher percentage when you're talking about developing countries. Many, many more people are farmers or subsistence farmers. When your crop is wiped out, that's not just the crop you planted, because you were going to get seeds from that crop to plant the next crop. So you're dependent again upon NGOs and the government to provide your next seeds or the money to be able to do that. We went back to the Philippines around month 3.5. They asked us to go to Isla Gigantes. Isla Gigantes are 2 islands, 3 hours by banana boat out from the big cities. And they'd kind of been forgotten. The typhoon went right over the top of them. It not only destroyed things on the island, but it also destroyed the seabed, something I had never thought of up to that point. So at month 3.5, they still could not fish. And these were not people that normally grew crops. They didn't have to. They lived off the bounty of the ocean and the coconut trees and the things that grew naturally there. And they honestly were starving. So we shipped in hundreds of bags of rice, got the attention of the Philippine government, and got them to start giving them more aid to get through until they could survive. Something else you have to face is survivor's guilt. This is actually a school where we set up a water purification plant so that everybody in the neighborhood that was still there could have clean water. the way we did it is we set up this huge thing. We poured water into it, muddy water into it out of the puddles. And there was a Sawyer filter on it that filtered out all the product. But how do you convince people to drink from that stuff? So we got the principal to come along. We said, if you drink this, they'll all believe it's clean. She gave us a look that could have killed, and she drank that first bottle of water that came out. But this is their schoolhouse. And when they not excavated, so before that, obviously everything up front was totally covered. And when they cleaned it out, they found 7 dead bodies there. Some of them the school kids that went to school there. So those children are going to come back to this school thinking about this. There's that survivor's guilt. Why did I live? Why didn't they live? And probably one of the biggest things, besides rebuilding, getting your crops going again, finding your medical records and being able to get treatment again, one of the biggest things is mental health. After a disaster, it goes on for years. We hear about those things and we try to work on it. Heart to Heart and many of the other medical response teams live under the WHO standards. So after Haiti, when a lot of chaos went on, they started certifying medical teams, and we are just as close to getting our certification, and we'll be the 4th group in the United States that have gotten it. So it's pretty tough to get. And they have started encouraging us to do mental health while we're in those situations. But remember, we're only there for a few months. There has to be long-term mental health. There has to be a way for people to build their businesses back, a way to start planting their crops again. It's not the kind of things we think of long-term, but it needs to be something that's done. So I didn't come with solutions. You guys are much younger than I am. Y'all can get busy and get this done. But there is hope that we know what needs to be done, and we just need people to work with us on it. Thank you.